This is Squidder Dragon from No Goblins Allowed. Um, I wanted to do a quick deck tech and just as a precursor to us hopefully getting started with the block tournament I've set up. Just wanted to first of all show kind of how this has been set up and also then go into my pool of cards and then finally show you kind of a kind of deck tech on the deck I've pulled together from the cube, kind of how that process happened. And then finally just try and jump online to do some matches. I've been testing it against AI. It's not really designed to be competitive for the full current meta, but it should do fairly well within the same pool of block that this is running. So um, let's first of all have a look at the cube itself. How this has been set up is on Cube Tutor I set up three separate cubes for the Origins, Kaladesh, and Ether Revolt block. So you can see here are the three different cubes. Here's the Origins one. It's all the Origin cards, 812. So this is not just the individual unique cards, but the copies based on the rarity that Magic Jewels has. We also have so you can see the list of cards here from the block. I've also got the other cubes set up. So what we did with that is for a kind of like sealed or like block tournament, I decided in order to create a decent enough pool for the cards that we would move on to have 9 boosters. And given that Ether Revolt is just out, I wanted to kind of try and focus it more towards Ether Revolt, but also as part of the block have some Kaladesh cards, and to just to create fillers or sort of fill out cards if you like, to have the Origins block. So the way we set this up is it's a total of 9 boosters of 15 cards each, so it's 135 cards total. 3 of the boosters, i.e. 45 cards, are from Origins. 2 boosters, i.e. 30 cards, are from Kaladesh. And again, the majority of the boosters, 4 of the boosters out of the 9, are from Ether Revolt for 60 cards, so 60 cards from Ether Revolt. So this is, I will show you now what my pool looks like. So I'm using obviously just Excel to track, but this is my pool of cards where I've highlighted, and we'll come on when we come on to the deck. With the cards I had in particular, if you see the list in my hand, I had mechanized production, and it's a mythic, and it's pretty powerful in combination with. So that was the first thing. The other thing that I had in the hand, which kind of steered me in the direction of the deck that I decided to build as a Demir blue-black, was I had Hani's expertise. So in terms of like control or removal. So my process was really just to highlight all the kind of blue-black cards, and then from there to go on and look at putting a deck together. So actually on this one here, this is the deck I ended up with. So the green here are the in effect it's a 60 card deck, so I'm not showing lands here. Obviously the idea is we can add in basic lands, but you can see here this is my selection. mainly, as you say, based around. There's some really nice synergies which we'll come on to from the deck. I'll show you the deck actually in Magic Duels in a minute, but this is the list. So there's a couple of good win conditions possible in the deck. It's quite nice given that it was from this limited pool. So we do have the mechanized production as the main sort of mechanism that we're trying to get going. We also have a lot of energy creatures. The Shipwreck Mori generates good energy and is a good blocker, and it's also useful for attacking, where you can kind of switch its power and toughness. You can see the rats obviously are a good cheap creature that generate energy and can also generate tokens as well. Some of the other useful cards that when the deck runs it seems to work quite well is we have efficient construction. So if we get that out as an enchantment, each artifact that we produce creates an additional token for us. And we have Cogwork Assembler, which again with enough mana can start to copy artifacts, which obviously doubles up with mechanized production. On the artifact side, we have a couple of the vehicles which can help us to start doing sort of damage. It's also pretty useful if we take one of those vehicles, particularly the Bomat Bazaar Bard, because it draws when it enters the battlefield. So if we get that out and we put the mechanized production onto it, it gives us quite a powerful draw engine. It just keeps getting, because for each one coming out, it keeps just generating card advantage. So there's it's quite a nice list, I think. I'll show you the list now in Magic Duels, and then we can come on to looking at some matches. So this is just finishing a match here. You can see here's the cube draft. I will go some AI matches. As I said, it's not designed to be really that competitive, I guess. It'll probably do fairly well. I mean, I haven't tried, but I wouldn't plan to try it in a proper versus match. But before we get to that, let's just look at the deck in a bit more detail. You've looked at it on the Excel list, but now we can look at it in the deck builder. Gives us the chance to look at the sort of things like the curve and sort of cards, etc., and then obviously what the fill out lands are. With the tournament, I'm obviously trying to generate. We only have a handful of participants, but I'm hoping that I can use this as an idea to show the community what we're doing, and particularly for iOS users, we'd love you to join and get involved. And we have ways around managing the fact that you might not have the full pool. I mean, obviously there's a lot of regulars, long-term Magic players, but anyway, so let's just have a quick look at the deck text. So starting at the lower end of the curve, Select for Inspection is a good early defense card in blue, to be able to both scrying, which can be useful, but also returning a creature. So it depends. We might want to hold on to it depending what threats are on the board, but it's useful to come into to bounce back a creature if it's threatening or it's too powerful for etc. We drew one of the cheap removal spells in Fatal Push, which can be quite useful early on. So particularly if it's against aggro decks that just want to put fast creatures out, if we have this in hand, we could just destroy the target creature. Another useful card, which at least gives us in the deck a bit of life gain. It's probably the only card that does this, but so it's situational as opposed to when you want to use it. You could use it early, obviously, but the longer you hold off using it, the more life you would get out of it, and obviously removing bigger threats. I also have Barrel, Chief of Compliance. We do have quite a few instance and sorceries that we want to run, so making them cheaper with Barrel works quite well. He acts as a decent kind of blocker, early blocker in his own right, having the 3 toughness. Um, uh, Most likely as well is useful in another regard, that he probably acts as a magnet for removal because of his abilities. So yeah, an all round a good card to have in this deck, and we're lucky again to draw him. I said the deck has quite a lot of energy synergy. So here we have the first of the cards, an Ether Swooper. It's a cheap creature with flying, which is useful. It generates energy when it hits a battlefield, but you can use the energy that it generates to create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact. So yeah, you're getting in effect an extra 1 power then for this coming out with the energy it's got. Moving on in a similar vein, in black, another cheap creature with the same power and toughness, generating 2 energy, and this allows us to add a +1/+1 counter when it attacks. Again, is a cheap defender, but useful with Death Touch for any nasty kind of threats on the board. We have 2 Ether Poisoners. They generate energy as they come out. So yeah, quite useful. So trying to it keeps the low end of our curve, and with Death Touch in particular, is a useful ability sort of to have out early to kind of hold back on attacks. Again, for some of the removal or trying to manage, more dangerous threats on the board, we had 1 copy of Ice Over, which you can enchant an artifact or a creature, and it doesn't untap. So it's useful for artifacts if there's an artifact that's generating or kind of getting out of control, in vehicles or whatever. This can be used to keep it tapped down. Again, just as a defense mechanism, Disperse can be useful as well to save your own creatures, or if a creature gets locked down by enchantments, like revoke privileges, something of that nature, you can return it to your hand, or you can bounce a big threat in the board, and it's useful as well. It's only a one-off, obviously, because of the way the cube works, but can be useful, obviously, to manage any planeswalkers. But they're probably not expecting too much in the way of planeswalkers in the deck because of the nature of the tournament being blocked. But if they did have, Disperse could handle that before it gets too out of control. On the removal, again, we have Subtle Strike. This is actually quite useful. It's kind of cheap, but early on, but it can be useful to throw some surprises in combat. You can attack with one of the smaller creatures, and when it gets blocked, you can obviously reduce the power of the blocker and pump up your own creature. That can lead to a nice little win. Likewise, Rush of Vitality, just a cheap boost with the advantage of both lifelink and indestructible. So again, this really does help to manage a board state. On the energy end, we drew in our cube an electrostatic pummeler. So again, he's good at generating those 3 energy, and then can obviously use that himself to increase himself or for other energy going on. Here's the first of the nice synergy that we have. with mechanized production. So we have Cogwork Assembler, which it's quite mana intensive earlier on. Obviously, it acts as an artifact in itself. It for 7 mana you can create a copy of a target artifact. Now we have some sort of high-end artifacts, so if you're spending 7 mana, you really do want some good advantage for that. So we'll see, we have some decent artifacts, whether they're vehicles or the constructs that probably kind of make sense. Foundry Inspector, again, fortunate to draw at least only one of these guys, but because we're playing a lot of artifact spells, this generates good making our artifacts cheaper, so it works really well if we can get it out early enough. Night Market Guard's another useful or interesting creature because, again, as an anti-aggro, it's able to block an additional creature each combat. It's obviously stands as an artifact, but if you have like aggro low blockers, it can actually take 2 of these out. It's only got 1 toughness, but it can do its damage on the way out. Another really good card from an artifact point of view, but just generally, is a Mobile Garrison. The big advantage with Garrison is, okay, it's got crew too, so the crewing's not too bad, but when it attacks, you can untap a creature artifact or creature you control, so it can pay for itself from a crew cost point of view. You can crew it, and then as it attacks, you can uncrew the creature or any other kind of artifact that may be tapped. Again, removal, very situational. I have this Metallic Rebuke, which I think is handy. It's interesting as well. It has improvise, so it can be cheaper to cast. You obviously need blue, but even with 1 blue and enough artifacts out, this is castable. It works. It works in situations that it can be a difficult one, because obviously once there are more mana and mana's open, it doesn't really work as a counterspell from that regard. But later on in a game, or even earlier, if you just want to stop, like if you're playing the beatdown, this could stop from in the early turns, somebody getting some more power in the board. Here are is a big energy generator, so works great as a blocker with 5 toughness, but it also can be quite difficult for the opponent as an attacker, because depending what they're doing, or if you want to remove something, you can attack with it and then wait, and then with the energy that it generates, and obviously the other energy from the other creatures, you can you can either use it as defender and boost its defense, or you can bump it up. Sorry, you can't change its defense, but you can actually use this for pumping up. Because we have a few useful creatures like Barrel, etc., and some of the other ones, as we'll come on to. Again, 1 copy of Gravekeeper seems to make sense. So, as he stands, he can just act as a 2/2 blocker, but being able to fetch back a creature that may have since been killed or exiled, or not exiled, but obviously just enabled to bring that back. Then we have Treasure Keeper, 2 copies. So this is useful again. It's maybe a little expensive at 4, but of course it fills out that slot, the 4 slot, fairly well. You can reveal, when it dies, you can reveal cards, and with a converted mana cost or less, you may put that you may cast that card. So it's kind of got a hidden spell for a cheap spell contained, which is kind of handy. And then we have, again, from an artifact point of view, The Duck P-file, again, great sort of defense. Again, at a cost of 4, it's relatively costly, but acts as a good defender, and of course not just on the ground, but obviously with the blue, it can go airborne and sort of protect the air as well. So and it's a 2-of, so I think from an artifact point of view, given that it's probably going to be cheaper to cast, hopefully with the Foundry out. Then we have the first of the vehicles, Bomb Up of Bazaar Barge. It's crew 3, it's quite expensive. The good thing about this is when it enters the battlefield, draw a card. So this is one of the ones I was talking about with mechanized production. If you have mechanized production out and obviously cast it onto this guy or this vehicle, every turn it generates a copy of the Bazaar Barge and you draw a card. So that can work really well as a target for the mechanized production. Here is the build around card, I guess, mainly for the deck in terms of mechanized production. So it's a card that I was excited to get in the pool because it's a great one to sort of think about building around. And there's a lot of artifacts that would make good targets for it to start copying. In conjunction with that, and on the artifact theme that supports it, is efficient construction. So, if I'm getting this out at a reasonable time and I'm casting artifacts, then this is quite useful because it starts pumping out Thopter artifact tokens. You'll see as well, this is obviously useful for fueling Improvise, which some of the cards have, which we'll come on to as well. This is the other thing that obviously pushed us down the black route. I kind of wanted that. I think these kind of decks in general, you need to be having a decent removal suite pretty much in duels these days, just because of the fast creatures that comes out, and unless you're going to be just playing that same game and trying to be faster, you need good removal. So again, because the pool had 2 of these Yahenni's expertise, a sort of mini languish -3/-3, it's you can cast a card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. So it's quite a strong card. In this particular deck as well, I think it works really well. So it gives us really although we have a lot of small creatures out, but it's a judgment call in terms of the match of when to cast this. But I think it's useful to have that option to clear a board down. Likewise, just as a one-off, useful, particularly for the big vehicles that are around. There is a one-off for Daring Demolition, again for the same cost, but can manage sort of usual threats, things like Harakir and some of the early stuff. They're just, or even like Thopters if it comes to it. And we have the last of the vehicles there, again, 5 mana, is a crew 3. Useful again because when it's 6/6 is damaging enough, but even if it's being attacked and blocked, it does 1 damage to target creature or player. So typically, unless you're clearing small creatures from the board, you want to be casting this at the opponent's face, just chipping away at the life total. At the top end as well, we said we had a lot of energy. At the top end we have the Ether Tide Whale, which generates a lot of energy, of course. It's decent at 6/4, and it kind of has a built-in protection for itself because it generates enough energy that if it's attacked or targeted, you can spend 4 of that energy to bring it back to the hand. So again, very useful. It was useful as well in the pool when I looked at it. This is a card I was interested in, although it's only a common, but because of the Improvise and the hexproof, and it's 4/4, was quite nice to have that I had 2 copies in the pool. So yeah, definitely had to put these 2 guys in there, and you know, the synergies quite well with the fact there's so many artifacts in the deck as well. And the at the top end we have the accomplished auto, just 1 copy of, but again the accomplished automaton, sorry, is a good target for something like Cogworks, you know, to create another copy of it, or for the merchant mechanized production. So I think we have enough good artifacts. Here we see the curve. The other thing as well in the pool, um, using lands, unless you're drawing a special land in the pool, obviously the deck can only be constructed with basic lands. I did have 1 Evolving Wild, so it's useful I've got this in the deck, because you know you may get a situation where you're drawing 1 of each color. I mean, you know, the blue's probably the key color in the deck in terms of generating the main win conditions. But obviously black, you want black to have removal. So that's the deck. Let's take it, as I said, I'll just do this in solo and run a couple of matches with it to see how it does. And hopefully gather some coin at the same time. So here's the deck, cube draft, and let's have a look and see what we get. This is also a bit of an illustration of what the AI does. I thought, given that there's a lot of singletons in the deck, sometimes the AI can come up with some kind of funny decks, and can end up with some funny builds, where nobody's really aware of quite what happens with. Here's our initial opening. Well, we've got good mana. We've got Shipwreck Mori, generating quite a lot of energy. We have a Treasure Keeper at 4 for an artifact. We've got Bastion Inventor, so if we get enough artifacts out, we could get him out early in some early defense. So this is a good keep. We'll keep the hand. Let's see if we're on the play. So we're playing against an AI green deck of some description. Untapped land, and here we have we've just drawn an electrostatic pummeler, so another artifact. So we should hopefully be able to get the Bastion out early, which it should work quite well. We've drawn yet another Shipwreck Mori, so I'm only looking for another land now, so that at least I've got some very good defense in the board. And AI is not casting anything, which is good. Oh, there's our extra land. So this, we don't know what deck the AI is running, but this looks to be a decent start. We get 3 energy in the board off the bat. We'd expect the AI to obviously have something to cast by now, probably. AI tends to be generally good at coming up with its mana, casting a land each turn, and then obviously coming out with a full deck. So 3/3, and of course we're going to be able to put up a defense for that with the Mori. Next turn I'll get the treasured keeper out, and then that should allow us, with the mana we've got, to cast. In fact, Bastion's almost coming out without needing to rely on the artifacts. So far so good. I'm going to leave the pummeler. I could leave that later on really to push more damage through, but for now he's got lots of energy to work with 7 energy, and I'm always going to be adding to that with the other Mori when it comes into play. This thing has got menace as well, so, and self-assembler, so he's obviously put a deck together. You can imagine he's going to fetch, he's going to put in these self-assemblers out, and the self-assembler obviously is going to be difficult from the removal point of view, but we'll see if we can get to before the hand. Now he does, so let's try and see if we can spend energy to kill this threat. Okay, that takes care of that. Again, you can see some of the synergies of actually using the energy. So now we have Bastion Inventor 4/4. What I think I'll do is actually charge up the energy again, so it's handy that there's fuel for the pummeler. The eel +2, -2. Yeah, the eel could actually take care of the assembler actually. So what I think I'll do is, given that I've got 2 of them out and energy to play with, see if it blocks it. It doesn't, so let's pause there and let's give it +2. Give it +2. So that gets in for a decent hit of 4. I've also got select for inspection, so in terms of trying to keep up with what the AI does in terms of attacking, you know, for now I could let it go through and try and do this race. Yep, here comes the second. And if I do a similar trick, yeah, so he's fetching all these 4/4s to come out. Again, he's choosing not to, whether he goes for a double block. Here we have the singleton evolving wilds. So fetch a blue since we have 3 black already. And what I think I'll do is I'll bring treasure keeper out rather than the bastion for now. I've got 3 energy to play with, so because I know he's going to keep bringing these out, I'm going to try the same trick and see what he does this time. If he double blocks, I can send one of them back. Yeah, there's double block going on, so I will put one of them back to hand. Oh. Yeah, but of course it's only if it's tapped, isn't it? So the Mori, one Mori down. So probably thinking about this, I should really let them attack. So I can use select. The idea is to use select for inspection, but of course I was on the attack. And Raise Giant, another big 4/4 comes out. So typical approach and strategy from the AI. Again, choosing not to. Right, so I've got. Yeah, I'm going to bring the poisoner out. I think for now we just and 1, 2, 3. I'm going to have to use improvise with the pummeler. tend to be the nature of AI. It can play mid-range decks, which means that matches go on for a while. I was going to try and play a couple of matches, but given that this one's going to be so long, I'll probably just cut it with just this one. But it gives you an idea. I think the idea is to try and show you how the deck works, and I think, as I said, it has quite a lot of nice, interesting things going on with it, so that can work quite well. The 0-5 is doing a good job of holding back, and here comes the, should be the final assembler, I think. Still curious about how the AI builds its decks, because certainly some like interesting routines that it would come up with a deck that ends up being normally fairly good against what you're playing. It's got to have some way of recognizing or identifying that, but not quite worked it out. You wouldn't think they would be clever enough for all the different thousands of combinations of decks you could have. So I guess it, because it can rank the decks in the deck builder, it may use that, saying it knows how it can rank it based on whether it's got right. So here, quite why, it's probably got some trick up its sleeve, but let's find out. No, just testing the waters. Now, this is handy. So here we have the card draw. Still haven't seen mechanised production, but get mechanised production, I'll keep copying these 5/5s, which should be enough to eventually get through his board. You just have to be patient. He's currently on 2. Doesn't look if he's running removal as such. He's just got creatures that to try and take us down. Okay, so 4 damage to target creature, and he's going to tap one of my lands. He's going to, that's interesting, I'll give us a free draw off of the back of that. I've got Subtle Strike, choose one or both. Yes, I can cast this, so cast a spell. There's nothing that's going to really be bothered with the -1, so I'll just use the +1, and I'll put it on the Bastion. So he's now a 5/5, which means he can take out any of these, and then I've got the 0/5 defender. It's a defensive game for now. What I want to do is to hope mechanised production turns up soon, then I can start copying the barge. No, just land. Quite often find this with AI can be quite annoying, because it gets to a certain point in the game and it's just, you just get land flooded. Same with AI, just gets to a land situation, but of course we just have to plough through the deck. Well, there's interesting cards when I was going through the card list and the kind of deck tech. You know, at this point in time, you know, the fact that we've got things like the Gravedigger can be useful, because we've got stuff in the graveyard. This is interesting. I know a lot of the regulars on No Goblins Allowed are very much key versus matches. The tournaments are a big scene, which is why I was always trying to. The IOS has the smallest population and no goblins allowed, but I understand and get why people enjoy tournaments. They want to sort of test their mettle, check their skills against other good players. So the majority of them just wouldn't entertain playing the AI for any length of time. I do quite a bit. Partly the reason is because iOS, you just can go ages waiting for a match, and obviously where I'm trying to keep the coinage up, I had enough coin to build to buy the AER outright, but I need to start building up the stockpile. Right now we have Ether Whale, which could be the card that breaks a deadlock here. Doesn't look as if the AI deck is running removal, so a 6/4 flyer could be enough to close this out, hopefully. I have enough defense in the ground. So as I said, the deck does have a number of win conditions. Obviously the whale is one of them. 4 damage to target creatures. Now this is where it's handy because I can use the return to hand, saving it. So that's really handy. This is quite a nice thing about this deck. It's sort of got the whale itself. It's got built-in protection. There was already quite a lot of energy, but it comes with enough energy. It's obviously going to try and use the solvent now. A lot of mana as a removal. I can bring the whale out, but I'll have enough energy to bring it back. We'll try that again. We know it's probably going to try and use the solvent, but we'll have the energy to protect the whale again, bring it back to hand. And again, the P-file now gives us an ability to put another creature in the air with blue. So it's just, this is, I think, this is a good illustration, I think, of what the AI decks try to do. They try to make the games go on as long as humanly possible. This is obviously why you can build. This is happening because, this is happening because I'm using a suboptimal build for playing against AI. It's still useful to test, as I said, because I could go versus. I mean, it's probably an idea to go versus, but it takes long enough to get matches with iOS, or I can do, and I don't want to just end up with giving a poor match, as it were. So whale comes out again. We're going to start trying to close this match out. So we'll send the P-file into the air. Continue. Get in for 2. It's kind of interesting putting your shoes in the mind of the AI in terms of, well, it's got a, now of course it has that for blocking. Well, at least we have the P-file and the ether next turn. They presumably would try and block a 6/4, but then of course it just loses it, so that's fine. Can't see, based on the deck that it's got, I can't see it getting through, and I've still got decent threats that haven't come out yet, so as I say, mechanized production would be good to show up. Again, just land for the minute, so let's do the same again. Put the P-file in the air and attack with both of those, which should remove its flying blocker. It's still kind of interesting, how the AI puts its decks together, because it knows it's got to try and allow for defense against flyers, etc., all sorts of stuff. So you tend to find if you've got large creatures, this isn't running white. I mean, it's got the another one, so it'll do the same again. So it just quite often seems to come up or find the card that it needs, which just means that the match goes on for longer. And I think that's kind of a deliberate way to build it. I think people argue about the AI, etc., but I think the AI is built in a particular way, given the nature of the game, to puts a decent enough deck. I mean, it's not as if it's bad. I mean, the good thing about the AI knows how to run its curve, its mana, etc., and that it doesn't generally, I mean, it can do, but not often it gets mana screwed, for example. But it's obviously designing a deck that takes as long as possible for the match to finish. And I guess the intention behind that is to then force players to spend out for packs rather than taking the time to grind. And there's probably another reason why, as I've said, most people would argue that you're far better off as long as you've got a decent deck and you can play reasonably well to go for versus, because there's a more payoff, and matches will tend to be not take quite as long as this, and you've got more payoff in terms of. So we should just close this out in the next couple of turns, and then I'll close the session. But the key thing is, if you're interested in this type of experiment, I know most of the time when the new release comes out, it's about finding the best, the most competitive meta, etc., etc. I think this does something a little bit different, and even for people that are it kind of levels the playfield a little bit. So even if you had the full collection, which I do, I'm having a random pool selected for cards, and I didn't. Let's put him up in the air. Can't do that. Okay, I'm not going to lose it, so it'll be over next turn anyway. Oh, he's putting again bottle gnomes, giving himself an extra boost of life. So yes, I'd dearly love to get more people involved. I think we would have enough of the regulars, hopefully, when they sign up in due course, that we should be good. But I would love anybody watching this that is interested in duels, has duels, and plays duels on the iOS platform to get in touch through No Goblins Allowed and sign up. The first thing would be the instructions are all included in the post that I put together, but it would be a case of so here's the Yaheni. As I said, the removals come, but of course it doesn't make any sense for me now to use that just yet. Let's remember to put the P file in there and put these two, let's say, once again with using the bottle gnome, the AI's kept itself going for one more turn. It's interesting where you would think it would get to a chance where it does a Hail Mary and throw everything at me, and the hope is going to win. There's Universal Solvent again. So does it use the mana for that? Try to activate it. Probably does. I can return it again, but I can use a P file to finish the match. Now does it throw everything in? given that it knows it's going to die next turn. I expect it to, yes it does. So, do we fall at the last hurdle? Let's see. So, haven't got to block stage yet. Okay, blocking. That one. That one. That one. That one. As long as I block. Confirm block. No. Oh well. That was disappointing. But again, it just shows you, I think, it's an illustration of the fact that the system can, the AI can put decks together that can still make for very, very long drawn out matches. Okay, thanks for watching, and please remember, visit No Goblins Allowed and sign up for the tournament, and look forward to seeing you in a match. Bye.